Hey guys, it's Ashton from Ashton Warrior Props, and you may be wondering why I used the very real and not completely handmade in my workshop version of the Dagger of Time just now. Well, that is because I had to rewind time to yesterday, which is now today, to re-record this voiceover because I didn't realize there was a data transfer version of the cable hooked up to my mic setup and a recording version of the cable. I want you to take a guess as to who recorded 6 videos with the data transfer wire. Hey guys, Ash from Ashton Warrior Props, and I'm re-recording this voiceover now. I did this last night or yesterday, along with several other videos, and then found out that my recording was scuffed. In today's video, we're going to be building the Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 version of the Elite, I guess that's all of them, the Elite Knight helmet. This is obviously the cover art. This is kind of the poster child helmet and armor from the Dark Souls franchise. I really enjoy it. It's a super fun build. It's not the most beginner friendly, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But yeah, here it is, and I'm gonna show you how to build it today. It's some work. For starters, head on over to my website and grab the free PDF template. The PDF templates are free, but here's a list of things that aren't. That joke is never gonna get old. I do all this for free because I like teaching people, but teaching doesn't pay the bills. Anywho, so after you have grabbed your free PDF template, go ahead on over to Blick Art Materials. There is an affiliate link down below. Once again, if you want to support the page, click that affiliate link. Grab a roll of 6, a roll of 4, and a roll of 2. That's what you're going to need for this build. The rest is a lot of scrap materials I had laying around the shop. A couple housekeeping things. It's scaled for a 24-inch noggin. That's what I have. And we are going to use 8.5 by 11 cardstock paper. That's what I use on poster mode. I cover all this and more in my how to use templates video. Once you've got all that squared away, go reference my how to use foam templates video for cutting out the paper templates, and that way we don't have to make this video a million years long. So, with all of that out of the way, I don't think I'm missing anything. Well, let's get straight into the build. As I said, for this build, you are going to need a healthy dose of 6, 4, and 2, which just, a healthy dose is actually equal to or greater than 1 roll. People always ask me, how much do I need of something? I don't know, it depends on how much space you take up when you trace your template. Cut out your foam template and your pieces. There are a few pieces that have some special cuts, and I'm going to go over those real quick. The faceplate does have a couple special angles and special undercuts. The edges that have special cuts like undercuts or outward bevels are color-coded, and this just makes your life a little bit easier. There are a couple areas where it is both a mix and then a straight cut, and we'll go over those real quick. So for the lower half of the faceplate of the build, the bottom edge, the swoopy whoop, it is going to have an outward bevel. The top of the faceplate has an undercut, like a 45-degree angle undercut, until you get to about midway to this last square, and then you straighten your knife out and keep going. The front of the faceplate is cut at a 45-degree angle on both sides. So you're going to do one 45-degree angle, flip, trace it, do everything again, 45-degree angle. The final note on the lower faceplate is life is made a lot easier on these rectangles if you use a punch or a flat X-Acto knife. One of them makes life a lot easier. The next order of business on this is the top faceplate. The top faceplate is a little more simple. The eyebrow ridge area is cut at an undercut, and that is to make sure it looks like thin metal around here rather than showing the thickness of the foam. The way the curve goes and the way the helmet sits, it will show that thickness. So I do like to do an undercut to just kind of mimic metal. The backside on the swoopy whoops are also going to have an undercut to mimic that same feature. And finally, the center that gets glued together, only one half is getting a 45-degree angle. So only one half of this is getting an undercut. The other half is cut at a 90-degree angle. The reason that is because you can see here that this peak is a lot sharper and this peak is a lot duller. Then we're gonna go on to the rest of the helmet and assembly. Now, the dome portion of this, which is gonna be, the dome portion of that is going to be cut out of 6mm HD foam, Once again, you can bevel the exposed edges later if you want to mimic metal. But right now, all you need to know is this is 6mm HD foam, and what we're going to start out by assembling is the dome and the chin. There is nothing real special about the dome pieces. The chin does have an undercut, about half the length of the like jawline. The chin form does have an outward 45-degree angle, and that you're going to glue up to the bottom of the form. To assemble the chin, we're going to start with the curved edge the smaller curved edge that looks kind of like a chin. You're going to apply your barge contact cement, let it get tacky on both sides, and then slowly push it together. Again, going slow, making sure your pieces line up is how you avoid ugly seams. Once you have your two chin plates together, we're then going to go take our chin form piece, which, hey Ryan, do we have enough in the budget to like display the PNG of the pieces right here if I send you the template? Whoa. After you've got your chin assembled, we're then going to go to the dome. As per usual with my templates, I do have a gluing pecking order for this. I like to make sure I lay it out kind of like so. And your sides should face the kind of C-shaped direction that the helmet pieces go. Make sure you mark front and back on these pieces. I have made the mistake in the past before by not marking front and back, especially on one pieces and then putting them on the wrong side. It will not come together that way. For my gluing order, I like to take pieces 1 and 1, put those together. I like to take 5 and 4 on both sides, put those together. 3 and 2 on both sides. And that way you have 3 easier sections to manage. And that just makes life a little bit easier because then you have easier pieces to put together. After that, you're then going to throw your 1-1, 5-4, and 2-3s together and create your lovely dome. Now, I've seen a couple comments on previous videos about, hey, I can't put this together because there aren't any registration marks. To that I say horse hooey. I don't know what horse hooey is, but I say it. Registration marks are not necessary, especially if the creator of the template has tested it several times. There is no need for registration marks. If it meets at the back and you line up and it meets at the front, it works just fine. Now, I did ask several creators out in the field, hey, why don't you put registration marks on your free templates that you give out? There were 3 schools of thought. There was, I put them in there just because I've always done that. I put them in, but I never use them myself because they're not necessary. And then 3, I don't put them in at all. A lot of people will use registration marks to kind of make it easier for newcomers. I will remember that for future builds, but once again, I have never, ever used registration marks on my builds, and I have never needed to. But if registration marks make you feel more comfortable, let me know in the comments and I will make sure to try to include those on my next helmet build. After you've got your dome together, I like to take it over to the belt sander and the random orbital sander and give it a light touch up. And this isn't overly necessary for this build per se, because this build is going to have the seams covered by some strips. Now, that all being said, it's a good habit to get in to make sure you are sanding your seams really, really thoroughly. Once you've sanded and cleared up any exposed seam areas, we're then gonna move into putting the neck and the chin together. Now, you will notice on the edges of the dome, there is this kind of open circular piece. That is there for a reason. I left it in there structurally for a reason. When you glue your chin piece on, start from the bottom and go up until it stops. It will meet where it needs to go. But once again, to reiterate, make your bottom edges of the dome and the chin match flush, and then just slowly work your way upwards, and that should leave you with the result you need. After that, we're gonna go on to the neck pieces. There are 3 neck pieces in the template. There is neckline, neck guard 1, and neck guard 2. Let's start with neckline. Neckline is the thinner piece that has an outward bevel on the top part that gets cut into it. To make this a lot easier, what I like to do with this piece of the template, to make one solid piece, trace, flip and keep the bottom attached, flip and trace again. Now that does leave the top pieces up here, which we're gonna glue together using barge contact cement to create this nice pretty circular shape. Once you've got that circular shape on there, make note of the 4mm glue surface that is in the template. That is to glue the next piece on, which is also a neck piece. So once you attach it, follow the interior line of the chin and dome. Follow it very slowly, making sure you line up everything. Make sure you match the seam from the neckline to the seam on the chin guard, and mark the center point of the back of the neckline to the back seam of the dome. It does go together exactly right. I've again tested it several times. Once you've got that on there, it should look something like this. And then we're gonna move on to the neck guard 1. Neck guard 1 is very similar to the tracing methods that I did for the neckline, other than you're not going to have an outward 45-degree angle on the neck guard. The neck guard 1 does have a glue surface as with the other one. Once you've got that cut up, copy the same methods, flip, trace, make one piece, glue the loose ends together, then you're ready to attach neck guard 1 to the neckline. Up next is neck guard 2, and we're literally just going to copy and paste the information from the last two pieces onto this one. After you've got it put together, just apply your neck guard 2 onto the neck guard 1, and you're good to go. Now you have the chin, dome, and neck guard. Next is that 6mm piece called the fin. The fin has a bevel on it, which I find a lot easier to Dremel once it's attached to the helmet, so we're going to go ahead and attach the fin to the helmet. As a reference point, if you kind of hold the fin piece up, like kind of away from the helmet, you can kind of match the curvature as to where it needs to go. Other than that, you can follow my guidance on this, which is about a 1/2 inch from the front of the dome is where the front gets glued, and about a 1/2 inch from the back of the dome is where the back gets glued. Once the fin is attached, take your rotary tool of choice and bevel the edges. It makes this nice sharp peak look here that's really noticeable in the game actually. Finally, we're going to move on to the faceplate. This is the part that makes this helmet the Elite Knight helmet. Otherwise, it's just a regular Knight helmet. First thing we're going to do, since we've already got our pieces cut out for the faceplate, is we're going to go ahead and attach the trim pieces. For the lower faceplate, it's that 2mm piece on your faceplate template. Once you cut that free, you simply cut it out of 2mm HD foam, and then we're going to glue it along the edge of our outward bevel. We are going to blend the lines after you've got it fully assembled. So once you have your lower faceplate trim applied on both sides, we're then going to glue at the center with your barge contact cement. Slowly work your way up from the bottom up to the top until you have this nice crisp lower faceplate. Now at this point, I do take my rotary tool with a high grit drum, and I go over the outer bevel and trim area just to kind of blend those lines so it doesn't look like a bevel and then a jutting out trim piece. After you've got the lower faceplate stuff put together, we're then going to use the lower faceplate form, which is kind of tricky to put in, but if you follow my instructions, it should go together just fine. So the faceplate form is that triangle piece that has the undercut on both sides. Simply wedge it up into the front of the lower faceplate and work your way back until it stops, and if you've done it right, it should stop about where your transition from undercut to straight cut happens on the faceplate. Once that is done, we're going to move to the top portion of the faceplate, and what I like to start with first is gluing the two halves together. Making note that once again, you are going to cut one half of this faceplate with an undercut on one side and the other half with a straight cut. This just gives you a less prominent peak on the front. Once that's done, we're going to go over the top 2mm trim. What I did for this was cut that wider trim piece first. I attached it onto the helmet, and then I cut my second trim piece, the skinnier version, glued it in place, and then once those two were together, I slapped it on the helmet. Now, if your trim pieces come out a little too far, it happens, just trim it up where your glue line is and you should be good to go. After you've got those details on, I do include in the template the eyebrow piece right here. You can alternatively just cut a 2mm strip and then just follow the eyebrow line here. Sky's the limit. There's no right or wrong way to do this. I attached both of these details using Bob Smith super glue. At this point, we're gonna glue the upper faceplate to the lower faceplate. What I like to do is apply my glue in the designated areas and then push the upper faceplate as far forward up to the faceplate form as you can, and then work your way backwards. Once again, if your details are impairing your ability to do this, just cut a little bit of the details off relative to where your glue spacing is needed. Now you have a really pretty faceplate. This is the iconic faceplate. Up next, what we're gonna do is we're not actually gonna glue this in place. What you'll notice throughout the video, as I've tried to put this on, it is not gonna fit over your head because this is what's called a form-fitted helmet. Form-fitted helmet means it's going to come over and then come under your chin, meaning you cannot pull it up this way. So we have to make this helmet split apart. And the best way to do that for right now is to use safety pins or furniture tacks to put the faceplate onto the dome and get it in a comfortable spot. The only reason I didn't mark a place for the faceplate to go each time is because some people have a longer face. You can kind of make it relative to what fits you the best and what rotates up and down the best. If you want the novelty of having it raise and lower really quick and really smoothly, you can just push it a little far forward and it'll raise and lower proper. Once again, I wanted mine to have this really nice no gap distinction right here. So I did pull mine a lot tighter. Once you've got it pinned, take a Sharpie, a marker, a pencil, whatever, and trace where it sits. This is important to make sure it sits still when you do this part, or else the lines will not line up later. While you draw your faceplate tracing, come over to the seam of the chin guard and the dome and mark down that seam with your black marker, and then make some stitch marks. The stitch marks are to indicate where we're gonna put magnets, because once again, this is going to split apart. The magnets I use are 5mm neodymium magnets, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Make your stitch marks, and then with one fluid motion, cut the chin guard and the dome separate. If you're not confident in cutting it in one fluid motion, when you saw it, just kind of lightly sand it to make sure it goes together smooth. Once you've got them in two separate pieces, use your marker and carry that stitch line over to the face that we're about to start drilling into, and that's just going to show you where you're going to put your magnets. Now for this, I used 5mm neodymium magnets, and I took my engraver head on my Dremel and just went lightly where my stitch marks were, all the way down on both the dome and both sides of the chin guard. Once I had those drilled out, I used Bob Smith super glue, scuffed the back side of every magnet, super glued the holes, put the magnets in, slid and pulled them apart, and you're going to essentially copy and paste that on both sides. Once you've got your magnets in place, keep in mind you need to keep the polarity of the magnets at the forefront of your thoughts when you're doing this, because magnets do have what's called a polarity. They have north and south, and they will not go together one direction, they will go together another. So it is important to keep in touch with that side of magnets, or else it's not going to go together at all. It's just going to push each other apart. Once you've got your magnets in place and the chin snaps together with a reasonable strength, we're then going to go to the hinge of the faceplate. Now for this part, I did use some Chicago screws. Before we get into this, find the piece on the template marked hinge bracket and cut that out of preferably a thin piece of plastic. If you don't have plastic, metal, a 3D print version of this, or you could technically use foam for this as well. Cut it out, and you're going to take your Chicago screws and find the bigger spade head, and you're going to drill a hole adequately sized for that Chicago screw. The reason we're using Chicago screws is because the female heads of them have a smooth bore on the outside, allowing the faceplate to lift and raise freely. What I like to do is drill an appropriate sized hole through the faceplate and into the dome. And once that's there, I run the female head of the Chicago screw through the faceplate and into the dome. And then what I do is I take my bracket piece that I cut out of plastic, slide it over the female end of the Chicago screw, and then super glue the other face of the bracket to the chin guard. Once you have that together, throw the male cap on the inside of the Chicago screw, which is on the inside of the dome. You may have to create a 4mm spacer or so, depending on the size of the Chicago screw that you use. And this is essentially going to act as a washer for the cap to go on. Once you've screwed the cap of the Chicago screw head in, it should be well and truly done. Don't make the mistake of super gluing anything to the bore of the Chicago screw head, then it won't move. And then you can't separate it to paint it. With that all said and done, the base build of the helmet is good. Raise and lower the helmet, snap it back a few times, make sure it lifts and stays connected, pull it back, lift the faceplate up and down. So this is what a 3-part hinge looks like, and you can apply this to literally any form-fitted helmet on the market. And if you look at actual historical form-fitted knight helmets, they all have a seam just like this one right here where the separation of the metal goes. Fun fact for you of the day. If you're having trouble sliding the faceplate up and down, make sure you're clearing a certain part of the dome. You can trim some off or add a piece, just kind of depending. Again, without being at your personal shop to tell you what went wrong directly, I don't know. But again, I've tested this several times, so everything I'm saying should work. the final parts on this, we are gonna cut our own version of triangle dowels. I used 4mm HD foam and cut personal triangle dowels for the seam covers on this. If you look at the game and the gecko statue, it has these peaked ridges like this. It's not fluted. What if it was actual metal, it would either be that he didn't added another piece, or they would have come from behind and hammered the triangle pieces all the way down. How we cut our own personal triangle dowels is we lay a long strip of foam and a ruler down, hold your blade at a 45-degree angle and pull, flip the foam over, and copy and paste at the peak of the angle from the previous cut and pull. Then you get these nice, pretty triangle dowels. Fun fact, you can use those for other things as well. You see, you're learning. After you've got those cut out, we're then going to use our seams from the dome build as a reference point. I played this, I'm gonna pat myself on the back here. I played this smart, and I put the seams exactly where these ridges would go so that you don't have to sand if you don't want to. You can literally just glue on top of the seams and have a pretty build. So once you've got your triangle dowels on there, do that with barge contact cement or super glue. We are then on to the final detailing of this build, which are the rivets. Now for the rivets, you can use anything circular and glue it in place. I like to use furniture tacks, throw them in, and then snip the backside because they're already rounded, so they have that more realistic look. The rivets I used on this were equal parts leather rivet caps and furniture tacks that I just trimmed the tails off of. There's 7 on the back, and they follow, once again, the seam lines from the helmet. There are 2 at the base of the chin guard right here. And then finally, I like to snip the tails of these larger furniture tacks and glue them over the Phillips head of the Chicago screw on the faceplate because, believe it or not, they didn't have Phillips head screwdrivers or flathead screwdrivers in medieval times. After that, the last set of rivets I did are only there on the gecko statue, and they follow the necklines on the seam right here. They're not game accurate, but you know, it really depends. The final detail, there's a detail on the faceplate. In the game, it's a little circle and then a rectangle at the 3rd rectangle right there. But in the gecko statue, there is a pin right here, only on the right-hand side, or stage right side, I guess. What I did for this little knob was I just took a plastic rod and a furniture tack, glued those together, drilled it in place, and put it there. And it's a real pretty rod. I don't want to say that, but I said it. After you've got all the rivets and stuff, if you are a freak like me, I added security magnets on the faceplate right here, and this is just to make sure it stays in place if I lean against a wall or something and it kind of squishes. That shouldn't happen with HD foam, but you know, it happens. I haven't had any kind of like mobility issues or any sort of like scuffs with that. After all that, you are done. I did add damage, which I didn't cover in the videos themselves, because I always encourage people to make your own story with your damage, especially if you're not cosplaying, specifically Oscar, then make it your own Elite Knight soldier. Give it its own damage, give it its own twist. So yeah, the damage I did a mix of my razor knife that I went through here and there on certain places, and then I did a Dremel, I did a couple dents in some places. Finally, you may be asking why mine is clear and glossy, and that's because I am using an alternative to Plasti-Dip that I will cover in another video. It is still HD foam under the gloss, it's just got a clear sealer on it right now. As you can see, you have a really clean build. The final note to make is if you have seams or splits anywhere, you can use Quick Seal silicone on a wet finger and just run it along to make sure parts that should be made out of one piece look like they're made out of one piece. And with that said and done, here are some of the result pictures and videos I took. Ooh, ah, hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm spinning in a chair. I hope you had fun building this. It is relatively a tricky helmet, but you know, it doesn't require a lot of extensive tools, just a little bit of know-how. As per usual, there is a Patreon. All of the donations to Patreon go directly to our lovely editor, Ryan. As you know, this is not our full-time job yet, so I cannot afford to pay Ryan directly out of pocket for anything right now. He offers to edit out of the goodness of his heart, because despite living in my basement being trapped there, he has developed Stockholm Syndrome, and it offers to edit for free. There's YouTube channel membership option there as well if you want to support the page. I haven't dedicated any additional goals and stuff for it just because I don't have time for it at the moment. But if you want to support the page, you can do that. There's also, my brother-in-law made this awesome t-shirt. It's an alternative version of my logo, which, if I do my job correctly, there is a link to down below as well. If you want to get in contact with me or show me anything that you've built, from anything really, the best way to show me is on Instagram, and sometimes I will even share it on my story. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or prayers, email me or DM me on Instagram. Those are the platforms I'm most active on. Future build videos or anything else, drop it in the comments. That should be it, I think. Deuces.